Hey everybody, welcome to another video in our series through the book of James. I want to just apologize right off the bat if the audio is not quite as good in this one. I have this microphone, but it needs a little adapter, and I'm 90% sure that adapter is in the car, which Candace is using right now because she's at work. So we're just having to go with what the iPad is picking up for us today. But we will get started into the final chapter of the book of James, chapter 5. And we're going to be going through the first 6 verses. Now, before we get into it, I want to remind you guys of a couple of things to remember when you're reading this passage and a lot of other passages of the Bible. First thing, you want to understand that the Bible was written to specific groups of people who lived at specific times and in certain situations that are oftentimes very, very different than the world we live in today. But that doesn't necessarily mean that the words that we read aren't true for us as well, because in a way, those things that were written for a specific group of people are also true for everyone. And the second thing I want to remind you guys of is that sometimes the Bible is talking about things that have already happened in our past, but at the same time, in another sense, it's also talking about things that are yet to come. So this kind of already but not yet, this whole idea of it was written for them but also for us, is something that we need to kind of keep in mind. And I'll try to point out how that works into the text that we're reading today. But let's get started. First off, let's read the first 3 verses. Come now, you rich, weep and howl for the miseries that are coming upon you. Your riches have rotted, and your garments are moth-eaten. Your gold and silver have corroded, and their corrosion will be evidence against you, and will eat your flesh like fire. You have laid up treasure in the last days. This is, once again, really strong language. Really hard things to say or to hear, right? Like this whole idea of like weep and howl over your misery, right? Those nice clothes that you have, they're eaten by moths. Those riches that you have, they're corroded and rusted, and they're going to burn you up like fire. Some harsh things to say. And why is he being so harsh on these people? Why is he going after these rich people that he's writing to? Well, they have been laying up treasure. Now that expression is something that Jesus actually uses. The most famous sermon in the Bible that Jesus has is something called the Sermon on the Mount. And in it he says that we aren't supposed to lay treasures here on earth, but lay them up in heaven. So what he means by that is the things that we're supposed to prioritize, the things that we're supposed to be centering our whole life around are things that have an eternal consequence, that have spiritual significance, right? Our lives shouldn't simply be about trying to get the nicest house, the nicest car, the nicest things, and just living the best life we can here and now, right? But instead, we should focus our energy and our time and our gifts on doing the things that matter for God, the things that will matter when this whole world passes away. Now, the thing that we have to also keep in mind is that it's not just that these people have the wrong goals, right? But also the way they try to achieve those goals. So verse 4 says that, behold, the wages of the laborers who mowed your fields, which you kept back by fraud, are crying out against you. And the cries of the harvesters have reached the ears of the Lord of hosts. So a couple things we have to keep in mind, right? So at this time, when James is writing, essentially the way to be a rich person was to have land, right? Like the only way that you could really have a ton of money was usually to own a ton of farmland, and then you would hire people to work that land. But what's happening, these people, they're holding back some of the money that they're supposed to be paying these poor people who are working their fields, right? They're living large. They're getting everything that they want. They are storing up all sorts of treasure for themselves and wearing nice clothes and having nice things, but they're not even properly paying the people who are taking care of their crops. And the thing is, God is aware of this, right? God is aware that these people are cheating those who are working for them. He understands that they are not properly paying those who, they owe, right? Because these people are in the field working hard, manual labor, day after day, and they're not even getting the money that they need to survive. And so James is saying, look, not only do you have the wrong goals, not only are you trying to just hoard up all the money you can, but you're also going about it in a dishonest way. You're hurting the poor people to get even more rich than you already are. And God is paying attention. God knows what all this is about. Right? He says of them that you have lived on the earth in luxury and self-indulgence. You have fattened your hearts in a day of slaughter. Right? So these people they're living large. They're making every wish that they have come true because they have all of this money. They can do everything they want. But James says, you're like a farm animal that's getting fattened up before they go to the slaughterhouse, before they go to the butcher. Now, what does he mean by that? Well, you see, there's something that's coming. When this is being written, there's something coming in history, not very long after, that is going to turn the whole world of these people upside down. And finally, the last verse that we're going to read today, verse 6, it says, you have condemned and murdered the righteous person. He does not resist you. Now, when I was doing my research, there was two main kind of interpretations of what is he talking about here. And I think they both fit pretty well, so I wanted to kind of let you know what the two are. The first one is that what he's writing about is, good people, righteous people who are poor, who are being oppressed, who are being condemned and even executed in the courts because these rich and wealthy people are using their money and they are, in a corrupt system, and they are, using their influence to get their way, and literally poor people are dying because of it. Now, that certainly was a thing that happened a lot then. I mean, it still happens to some degree now, but especially back then, this was a much more common thing to happen. The inequality between rich and poor was way worse at this time in history. But there's a second interpretation, and I think this is actually closer to, in my opinion, what I think he's talking about. They've condemned and murdered the righteous person. But the Greek kind of doesn't get that specific necessarily, it just means the righteous one. And a lot of times when the Bible talks about the righteous one, it's talking about Jesus. And if you remember, when Jesus was put on trial and executed, it was mainly the religious leaders who were wealthy people, who were powerful people in that society, who kind of used their influence to try and kill Jesus. And they succeeded in that. And Jesus did not resist them, right? He remained silent. Even when he was standing trial, he didn't really speak much in his defense, right? These people who were plotting and planning to kill him and then carrying that out, he didn't really speak up, right? He patiently took on that punishment, even though it was unfair, even though it wasn't righteous. And I think this is closer to what James is writing about. But here's the thing. For the people that were the rich people in this time when this book of James was originally written. What they didn't necessarily know was there was something coming in their near future that was going to rock the whole land of Israel. See, what happened was, shortly after James wrote this letter, there was a rebellion. And the Jewish people of Israel led a rebellion against Rome, because Rome had been ruling over them for almost 100 years. And so what the people did is they took arms and they killed the Roman soldiers and they tried to regain independence. But what ended up happening was Rome raised a massive army and came in and wiped them out. They destroyed Jerusalem, they tore down the temple, they killed people. And this is a documented thing in history. This was a terrible thing. And these wealthy people who had stored up all this treasure, it was taken from them. I mean, if they even were lucky enough to survive, they weren't rich anymore because everything they had was destroyed. Right? There was a consequence, for all of their actions that was coming. God literally punished that nation. And so if you were someone who had, all of this land and all of these nice things and all of these nice clothes, the reality is that you could enjoy that, but it was going to be temporary, because sooner or later things were going to fall apart completely. So here we get to the question of, now, how does this apply to us, right? Because we're not necessarily wealthy landowners living in the first century about to be destroyed by the Roman army. So what does this mean for us? Well, I think there's a few things that we can take into consideration. The first is that whole idea of, don't base your life around trying to have treasures in this world, right? There's so much more to the life that God has given us than simply having a nicer house, a nicer car, nicer things, nicer vacations. And there's nothing inherently wrong with having good things, but if we put that at the center of our life and ignore the more important things, the spiritual things, the eternal things, then we are wasting our lives. Secondly, we have to be aware that we might be part of the problem when it comes to injustice, when it comes to people not being paid for the work that they're doing, right? We live in a world where modern slavery still exists, right? You think of sweatshops, the people who make our clothes and the things that we use every day, so many of those people work crazy hours and aren't given even the wages that they need to survive. And we have to be aware that we might be a small part of the problem. And we have to learn to stand up for these people who are being mistreated, because God is aware of the injustice and the unfairness of our world. And just like these people who were going about their lives trying to get as much as they want, trying to make all of their wishes come true, and it didn't matter who they had to step on to get their way, there was a reckoning that was coming. There was going to be a day when those things were taken away. And we don't know when Jesus is coming back. It could be tomorrow, it could be 1,000 years from now. But we do know that all of us are mortal, and we're all going to die one day. And the things that we pile up for ourselves in this world, we're not able to take that with us. And if we have made our entire life about chasing after the things of this world, rather than giving our lives to God and making the things that are His priorities our priorities, then the only thing waiting for us is destruction. And that's a heavy truth, but it's true. And we need to be careful that we don't get caught up in the pattern of our world, that we don't get so obsessed with all of the nice things that we might have in this world, that we forget to do the things that Jesus wants us to do. And so once again, we have this warning from James to not make our lives look like the rest of the world does. We have to have different priorities, different goals, right? Different methods. Because otherwise we're just falling into this trap that tells us that everything that matters is right here and right now. But the truth is, guys, that the things of right here and right now are fading away. The nice things that we have are going to decay. They're going to be destroyed. They're going to pass away. Right? They're not going to last. And so we got to be careful that we don't make our life all about those temporary things, but instead about the treasures of heaven, right? The things that are going to last for an eternity. And so that's my hope and my prayer for you, right? As you're deciding where to go in life and what to do for a career, what decisions to make, remember that this life is not about the temporary things, right? It's not about money and power and stuff. It's about doing the will of God. I hope that was meaningful for you guys. It was definitely meaningful for me. Have a great week, and we'll see you later. Take care.